The range was loud, impatient, and unimpressed. Concrete bays echoed with the sharp rhythm of controlled fire, each report followed by the faint buzz of electronic targets resetting downrange. The air smelled of powder and oil, a familiar mix that clung to the walls no matter how often they were cleaned. She stood at the back of the line, waiting. A woman in civilian clothes didn't draw much attention here. Until she did. No uniform, no patches, no swagger. Just a quiet presence and a rifle case that looked older than most of the men holding newer, flashier gear. A man 2 lanes over glanced at her case and smirked. "Long day for beginners," he muttered to no one in particular. She didn't react. At the far end, the range instructor called out distances. 100 meters, warm up. Shots cracked down the line, tight groups, confident noise. She waited. When the line reset, the instructor raised his voice again. 300 meters. A few shooters adjusted optics. Others frowned. Groups widened. Pride softened. Still, she waited. The instructor glanced down the line and stopped when he reached her. "You shooting today?" he asked, tone polite but already dismissive. She nodded once. "What distance?" She met his eyes calmly. 500. A few heads turned. Someone laughed. "That lane's for certified shooters," the instructor said. "This isn't a tourist range." "I know," she replied. Silence, brief but noticeable. The instructor hesitated, then gestured. 1 shot. That was all she needed. She opened the case. The rifle inside wasn't flashy. No polished carbon fiber, no aggressive angles. Just a long, clean system that looked maintained rather than admired. The kind of rifle built for function, not conversation. Murmurs rippled behind her. She settled in. No rush, no theatrics. Her movements were economical, rifle placed, bipod set, body aligned as if gravity itself had given her instructions. She adjusted the scope once, then again, then stopped. Downrange, the 500-meter target waited, a distant shape barely visible through heat shimmer. Someone whispered, "She won't even see the plate." She exhaled. The range went quiet without anyone calling for it. She didn't check a phone, didn't consult a chart, didn't ask for wind flags. She simply waited for the air to tell her what it was doing. Then she fired. The shot sounded different, not louder, cleaner. A beat passed. Then the steel rang. Dead center. For a moment, no one spoke. The instructor stared at the monitor. The men down the line leaned closer. Someone cursed softly under their breath. The target camera zoomed in. Perfect impact. Not lucky. Not clipped. Center mass. Exactly where it shouldn't have been possible without preparation most people never bothered with. The instructor cleared his throat. "Do it again." She shook her head. "No." That drew more attention than the shot itself. He looked at her now. Not dismissive, not amused. Curious. "You don't want to confirm?" "I don't need to," she said. A man further down the line finally asked the question everyone was thinking. "Where did you learn that?" She paused, just long enough to feel the room lean in. "Somewhere quieter," she said. "Before I tell you what happened next, subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments what time it is where you are watching from. It helps more than you know. The range resumed, but the rhythm was off now. People shot differently, looked downrange longer, missed shots they shouldn't have. She packed up slowly. As she zipped the case, the instructor stepped closer. His voice dropped. "That rifle isn't set up like a civilian's." She met his eyes again. "Neither am I." That was when a man near the observation window lowered his phone. He'd been recording, at first to mock, then to document. His expression had changed somewhere between the shot and the silence that followed it. "You ever shoot further than that?" he asked. She slung the case over her shoulder. "Yes." "How far?" She thought about it. Not the distance, but the cost. "Far enough that people stopped asking questions," she said. She walked out before anyone could stop her. Behind her, conversations sparked fast and uneven. Someone rewound the footage. Someone else checked ballistic tables. Another quietly recalculated everything they thought they understood. None of them noticed the man who'd been watching from the far corner, the one who didn't look surprised at all. He raised his phone and stepped outside after her, because 500 meters hadn't been the impressive part. It was how little effort it had taken. The parking lot outside the range was half empty. the afternoon sun bleaching the asphalt into a dull gray. She reached her car without looking back, the rifle case resting easily against her shoulder, as if it weighed nothing at all. She had just set it in the trunk when a voice stopped her. That wasn't luck. She straightened slowly and turned. The man stood a few steps away, mid-40s maybe, dressed plain enough to disappear in a crowd. No range badge, no weapon visible. His hands were open, relaxed. He hadn't followed her closely. He'd given her space. That alone told her he wasn't an amateur. Most things aren't, she replied and closed the trunk. He smiled faintly. 500 meters. Cold range, no wind flags. 1 round. That wasn't a trick. No, she said. It was a solution. He studied her more carefully now. Not her face, her posture, the way she shifted her weight, the absence of tension where most people carried it. They underestimate you in there, he said, nodding toward the range. They always do, she replied. He reached into his jacket, not fast, not slow, and produced a folded card. He didn't hand it to her. He just held it where she could see the seal pressed into the corner. Her expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes did. I'm not interested, she said. You will be, he replied, because the man we're looking for took a shot that shouldn't exist. She paused. Try again, she said. 3,900 meters, the man continued. Mountains, thin air, 1 round, no follow-up. The sounds of the range faded behind her. Not literally, but in the way the mind chooses what to keep. That's not a real shot, she said. That's what everyone said, he replied, until the impact data came back. She opened the driver's door but didn't get in. And then? She asked, and then the shooter vanished. She closed the door again. Who? She asked. A ranger, the man said. Best long-range operator in his unit. He made the shot, destroyed the weapon, and disappeared before extraction. She looked at the horizon beyond the lot, heat rising in thin waves. Sounds like he didn't want to be found, or he wanted very specific people to notice, the man said. People who wouldn't ask the wrong questions. She laughed softly, not amused. You're assuming intent. I'm assuming design, he replied. Same thing at that level. She turned fully toward him now. Why are you telling me this? Because you didn't ask about wind at the range, he said. You waited for it to talk to you. She was quiet. Because you refused a second shot, he added. People who prove things for a living usually want confirmation. You didn't. She crossed her arms. That's not proof of anything. It's proof you've been somewhere mistakes get people killed, he said. The words hung there, unadorned. I'm a civilian, she said finally. I fix rifles. That's all. Then explain this, he said, unfolding the card and turning it over. Coordinates. Elevation. A timestamp. Her breath caught before she could stop it. He saw it, just for a fraction of a second. But it was enough. You know what happened there, he said quietly. She handed the card back. I know that if that shot happened, it wasn't about the target. His eyes sharpened. Go on. It was about timing, she continued. About forcing attention, about buying space. Space for what? He asked. She shook her head. That's not my problem. It becomes your problem when the man who took the shot doesn't come home, he said. She turned away, keys in hand. People don't disappear after shots like that, she said. They disappear before them. She opened the door, paused, then added, if you're looking for answers, look at what moved while everyone was staring at the impact point. She got in and started the engine. The man stepped back as she pulled out, watching the car merge into traffic. He didn't chase her. He didn't call after her. He didn't need to, because the way she'd said impact point told him everything, and because somewhere between the 500-meter bullseye and the mountain coordinates a past she'd buried had already begun to surface. Not loudly, not yet, but with the kind of precision that never missed. She didn't go home right away. Instead, she drove until the city thinned and the road curved into something quieter, a place where traffic lights gave way to long stretches of asphalt, and the radio lost its signal in soft bursts of static. She turned it off anyway. The coordinates stayed in her head. Elevation, angle, timing. 3,900 meters wasn't a number you forgot once you understood what it meant. It lived in a narrow band of possibility where physics stopped forgiving mistakes and started punishing them. She pulled into a turnout overlooking a dry ravine and shut off the engine. The heat radiated up from the ground, blurring the distance the way bad glass did. She sat there for a long moment, hands resting on the wheel, breathing slow. She had promised herself she was done. New city, new name, a life built on civilian routines and quiet mornings. She had chosen anonymity the way other people chose comfort, but the shot didn't care about promises. She took the folded card from her pocket and unfolded it again, even though she already knew what it would say. The coordinates placed the shooter high above a natural corridor, one that would funnel movement while hiding it from most observation. Wind would be unstable, temperature layers brutal, a place where only someone with experience beyond theory would even attempt a solution. She whispered it before she could stop herself. That wasn't a kill shot. The realization settled heavily. If the ranger had wanted the target eliminated cleanly, there were easier ways. Shorter distances, cleaner angles, less noise. The only reason to stretch the shot that far was to make it impossible to ignore. A spectacle, a diversion. She drove again, this time with purpose, back toward the workshop. Inside, the space felt different now, not unfamiliar but inadequate. She powered up her system and began reconstructing the shot from memory, not from data. Wind layers first, then spin drift, then the subtle correction most people forgot when elevation crossed a certain threshold. Her fingers moved quickly, almost impatient. She stopped when the numbers lined up too cleanly. "That's not luck," she said softly. Someone had corrected the final solution manually, not software. Judgment. She leaned back in her chair, eyes on the ceiling. Only someone who had made shots under pressure, real pressure, the kind that didn't allow retreats, would trust themselves enough to override the math at that distance. Her phone buzzed. A message. No name. "We're being told to drop it." She didn't respond. A second message followed. Too much attention, too many questions. She stared at the screen, then typed a single reply. "Then you're looking in the wrong place." Minutes passed. Then, "What do you mean?" She exhaled slowly. The shot wasn't the objective. It was the timer. The reply came slower this time. "Timer for what?" She hesitated, then sent it anyway. For something to move while everyone watched the wrong thing. The typing indicator appeared. Disappeared, appeared again. "You're sure?" She closed her eyes. "I've seen this before." That was more than she'd meant to say. The phone went silent. Outside, the sky darkened, the heat easing as evening crept in. She shut down the system and locked the workshop. The familiar click of the bolt sounding louder than usual. As she walked to her car, she felt it clearly now. The shift she'd tried to avoid. The story wasn't about whether the shot was possible. It was about why it had been taken, and why the man who took it hadn't come back. She slid into the driver's seat and rested her head against the window for a brief moment, letting the past press close without fully letting it in. Because if she was right, the ranger hadn't gone missing. He'd stayed behind, and whatever he'd stayed behind for wasn't finished yet. The first rule she broke was a small one. She checked the wind, not outside her workshop, but across the mountains in the coordinates on the card. She pulled archived weather data, layered it hour by hour, elevation by elevation. The pattern emerged quickly. Gusts rolling down from the ridgeline, flattening briefly at dusk, then turning erratic just after nightfall. A narrow window. Too narrow for coincidence. She closed the files and leaned back, hands steepled, eyes unfocused. The ranger had fired at the exact moment the wind behaved long enough to lie. Anyone else would have missed. Anyone else would have waited. He hadn't waited, which meant something else had been running on a clock. Her phone rang again. "Same number as before." "You didn't answer," the man said. "I wasn't finished thinking," she replied. "That's not usually how this works." "No," she said. "It's how it survives." He exhaled. "We lost aerial coverage of the corridor for 3 hours after the shot. Official explanation is sensor recalibration." She almost smiled. "Of course it is. We're being told the ranger acted alone." "He didn't," she said. "But he planned to be alone when it ended." Silence followed, longer this time. "You're saying he volunteered to disappear," the man said. "I'm saying he volunteered to be the loudest thing in the mountains," she replied, "so something quieter could move. And you know this because I've done it, she cut in. The line went very still. That's not what your file says, he said carefully. Then your file is incomplete, she replied. Another pause. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, not softer but more precise. What did he move? She closed her eyes. Not who, she said. What? The distinction mattered. She pulled up satellite imagery again and marked the corridor, then extended the path beyond it. Where it exited, where it vanished into logistics routes that hadn't been active in years. Hardware, she said. Something that shouldn't be logged. Something too sensitive to move openly. And he stayed behind to make sure the window held, she finished. The man didn't argue. You realize what this implies, he said. Yes, she replied. Someone authorized this without leaving fingerprints, and now they're erasing the cost. The cost. A missing ranger, a burned rifle, a story that ended neatly on paper and nowhere else. We can't act without clearance, he said. You can, she replied. You just won't. He didn't deny it. Then why are you calling me? She asked. Because you saw something no one else did. She looked at the workshop wall, at the faint outlines where older equipment had once hung before she'd stripped the space down to something harmless looking. I saw it because I wasn't supposed to, she said. Another silence. Where would you go? He asked carefully. If you wanted to confirm this. She didn't answer right away. To the ridgeline, she said at last. Not the hide, past it. That's restricted terrain. She allowed herself a thin smile. That's why it works. He hesitated. If you do this, you're not a civilian anymore. She shut down her computer and reached for her jacket. I stopped being one the moment someone took that shot, she said. The call ended without agreement. She packed lightly. No uniforms, no insignia. Just practical gear she'd never thrown away because she'd known, somewhere deep down, this day might come. As she locked the workshop door behind her, the city felt distant already. The past hadn't come crashing back. It had simply stepped forward, and this time, she wasn't going to look away. The mountains greeted her without ceremony. No signs, no warnings. Just rising ground and thinning air, the kind that punished shortcuts and rewarded patience. She parked where the road stopped pretending to exist and continued on foot, moving steadily. Conserving energy the way experience taught you to. She didn't rush. People rushed when they were afraid of what they might find. The first sign came an hour in. A scuffed rock turned the wrong way. Not careless, deliberate. A mark meant to be invisible to anyone who didn't know what to look for. She stopped, crouched, and confirmed it with a second sign a few meters ahead. He'd expected someone to follow. That narrowed the possibilities. She climbed higher, the terrain growing harsher, the wind less honest. By midday, she reached the ridgeline the data had pointed to. Not the hide itself, but beyond it, where most searches would have already turned back. She found the hide anyway, collapsed carefully. Stones returned to near original positions, no panic, no blood, no sign of struggle. The rifle had been destroyed exactly as the telemetry suggested. Barrel split, optic ruined, action warped just enough to be unrecoverable. He had erased the tool, not the work. She moved on. The trail beyond the hide was harder to read, but it was there if you trusted absence as much as presence. No broken branches, no deep prints, just a subtle wrongness to the ground, like a sentence missing a word. She followed it down toward the corridor. The transfer site came into view as the sun began to drop. An open scar in the earth where something heavy had rested briefly and then moved on. Tire compression, scrape marks, temporary power hookups torn out instead of disconnected. Fast, quiet, professional. She knelt and ran her fingers along a groove in the dirt. Cargo, she murmured. Not personnel, not a team. Equipment. Something large enough to require coordination but important enough to move under cover of misdirection. She straightened slowly. That was when she saw him. He was sitting against a rock outcropping just off the corridor, posture relaxed but alert, as if he'd been waiting for the landscape to change its mind. No weapon visible. Pack empty, eyes sharp. You took your time, he said. She stopped a few steps away, not startled, just assessing. You stayed, he nodded once. Someone had to. You knew they'd pull out, she said. I knew they'd hesitate, he replied. That's all it takes. She looked past him down the corridor. They moved it. Yes, and you let yourself become the story. He smiled faintly. Easier than becoming the evidence. She studied him now. The calm, the economy of movement, the lack of apology. A man who understood consequences and accepted them without ceremony. They'll write you off, she said. Missing. Presumed dead. Problem solved? He shrugged. For them. She exhaled slowly. You burned the rifle on purpose. One shot, he said, one message. And if no one understood it? He met her eyes. I was hoping you would. The words landed heavier than they sounded. She looked away, scanning the ridgeline as dusk crept in. You know what happens now. Yes, he said. Either the truth surfaces or it disappears properly. She nodded once. Then we finish it. He stood, testing his footing. The light was almost gone now, the valley sinking into shadow. Below them, the corridor lay quiet, its purpose already fulfilled. Above them, the sky darkened, stars beginning to appear, cold, distant, indifferent. The hardest part was over. What came next would decide whether the shot had meant anything at all. They moved before night fully settled. Not in a hurry, not lingering. The kind of movement that came from agreement without discussion. The corridor below them was already quiet. Its purpose finished. Whatever had passed through was long gone, carried beyond the reach of anyone who would admit they'd been watching. They followed the ridge east, keeping elevation until the ground softened and the slope widened. The ranger led them to a narrow service road that hadn't been maintained in years. A vehicle waited there, unmarked, forgettable, exactly as it should have been. He stopped beside it. This is where I disappear, he said. She studied the road, the tire tracks already fading. And where the story gets written without you. That was always the plan. She didn't argue. She understood plans like that. Plans where survival wasn't the objective, impact was. They'll reopen it, she said. Not publicly, quietly. Enough to make people uncomfortable. He nodded. That's all I wanted. She reached into her pack and handed him a small folded page. Calculations, wind corrections, a final note. If they ever try to repeat it, she said, this is where it fails. He took it without comment. They won't, because they can't, she replied. Not without paying the same cost. For the first time, he smiled fully. That's why I asked the question. They stood there a moment longer, neither rushing to leave. Then he opened the vehicle door and paused. You didn't have to come, he said. Yes, she replied. I did. He nodded once, then drove off, the sound of the engine fading into the mountains. She watched until the road emptied again. By the time she returned to the city, daylight had reclaimed it. Traffic moved, shops opened. People argued about ordinary things. The workshop door unlocked like it always had. Inside, nothing had changed. She cleaned the bench, realigned tools, tuned the radio to a neutral station. To anyone watching, she was still just a civilian weapons specialist with a quiet life and a forgettable routine. But some distances once crossed didn't vanish just because you stepped back. The footage from the range circulated quietly. Not viral, not loud, just enough to be noticed by the right people. Questions resurfaced, files reopened. A missing ranger stopped being a footnote. And when someone somewhere tried to explain away the impossible shot, the explanation no longer held. She worked through the afternoon without interruption, hands steady, mind clear. The past didn't chase her. It no longer had to. She had answered the question. And if you've been listening this far, subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments what time it is where you're watching from. It helps more than you know.